Hello, everybody. And so here we are at the end of this second day of this global summit discussing about all things wellness and well-being. For those of you who are watching right now, we had planned one more day, which was tomorrow, but we are, for a number of reasons, we're going to be moving that day to another date. So stay tuned for those changes. And either way, yesterday, we had four amazing panels and conversations. Today, this is the third panel of the day and the last panel of the day. And we are going to be discussing around productivity, performance, and how to deliver the best human experience at work. So I am really excited about this conversation. We are going to be here with you for the next hour or so, discussing about all these topics. And in the meantime, please, if you are just connecting now, let us know where you are connecting from. If you have any questions, or if there's anything that you want to bring to our attention, the attention of the panel, please feel free to post it in the chat. But at the same time, I have seen a lot of interactions among the many participants in this panel, in this conversation. So make sure that you continue to share your ideas, your thoughts, resources that you want to share in the chat. So for now, I'm going to be welcoming our panel, Heather, Lauren, and Bridget. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am really excited about this conversation. I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to mute your microphones while you are not speaking, just to avoid as much as possible any background noise. And well, let's kick this off. Let's talk about productivity, performance, and delivering the best human experience at work. And I want to share with you a little background of why this one panel. There are a number of great leaders out there that they put the people agenda first, even if that doesn't necessarily, but it does, but even if in their minds it doesn't necessarily revert back in money or ROI or profitability for the business. They put the people agenda forward, and they put the human experience and the wellness and well-being agenda forward, because that they know that that's the right thing to do for the people. And we know that doing the right thing for the people is also doing the right thing for the business, but that's not where they come from. Now, there are a lot of other leaders who still find that this is an important agenda, but for them, there's a gap between connecting that agenda of wellness, well-being, human experience, and building a healthy, successful, profitable organization. And I wanted to build this panel, and I wanted to have this conversation to help others, especially in HR, create the case if they are actually working for some of those leaders, to create the case to say mental health, wellness and well-being, human experience are not just nice to haves, but they have an impact in our bottom line as an organization. And this is how, and this is what we can do to create that case. So that's sort of the background of why this long title for this panel. So I'm going to ask you to please introduce yourselves, and I'm going to ask you one question right off the bat. My question would be this: if you approach a leader, corporate leader, CEO, CFO, and that person says to you, I know that caring for the wellness and the well-being of our people is important. I'm not saying that that's not important, but how is that going to impact the success of our organization? How is that going to save us money or make us more money? How would you approach that conversation? You can tell that I'm getting very tactical with this first question. So if you can introduce yourselves and respond to that question, I think we are off to a wonderful beginning of our conversation. So who wants to kick us off here? Heather, we go with you and then Bridget.
All right. So Heather McBride Morse, and I'm the global head of people at Shift Moving. So little startup that's growing very large, very rapidly. And from that standpoint, one of the key things that I was brought in to do was really help a fast-moving, fast-growing company when clarity of roles become, a little bit harder to do. the ability to be agile. And our leaders haven't seen how large companies operate. So brought in to be able to help them and having these type of conversations with them of why is it that we think that happy, healthy employees service happy, healthy customers who then lead to our financials? So the service profit chain. But you have to make it real to them. And one of the best stories that I've read about this is The Myth of the Garage, and it's by the Chip and Dan Heath. It's a free read, so you can look that up. But it talks about how these great companies weren't really built inside garages. They were built inside great companies, and then they decided to take their passion into the garage. And they
Yeah.
use the analogy of an orchid. And you'll see, I keep an orchid. Oh, there we go. I keep an orchid behind me as a visual reminder as well. And really, instead of saying, hey, either the employees are on the bus or off the bus, they're on our mission or they're not, it's really, there's some employees that thrive in certain environments and don't thrive in others, just like an orchid. So we don't say, hey, orchid, if you're not going to make it in this environment, I'm going to, toss you out. No, we make the environment for the orchid to thrive. And so that's kind of the analogy, using that for the workplace and for the employees, on how we need to look at that, and how then the employee thrives, the employee takes care of the customer, and then the financials come.
Absolutely, Heather. Thank you so much. And I know the orchid very well because I have a lot of plants and I love my plants. I have never been able to care for an orchid. I have no idea why. So maybe I'm going to have to create a better environment for them.
There
Uh,
you go.
yeah, thank you so much, Heather. Bridget?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bridget Wilder. I serve in the role of Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer at CalArts. I like to call myself, though, a people detective because my job is to listen to my stakeholders, but also to listen to what they're not saying so that I can help them to identify the best solutions. And that leads to what I would say to that leader. It's important that we meet leaders or employees where they are. So I would want to find out why they feel that what are they looking for in their customer experience? What do they value for that? And then tie in the return of investment on how that ties back to the employee experience. You have to find reasons that resonate with that leader versus, a lot of times leaders say to HR people, you're living in a bubble
Yeah,
because they think that all we care about is the feel good stuff. But the reality is, if we don't have a great employee experience and next level human experience, that customer experience is going to be impacted.
absolutely. By the way, I love the living in a bubble thing because now it is them who don't care about this who are the ones living in a bubble, because you find out these days that one of the top reasons why people are leaving their jobs is not for money. It's because of they want respect, they want flexibility, they want inclusion, they want belonging, and all of those things fall within the spectrum of all things human experience. So the bubble seems to have turned in another direction, I guess. So Bridget, thank you so much for that. Lauren?
Hi, everybody. This is such a critical topic. Lauren Rosario Maldonado from Claro Enterprise Solutions, based here in South Florida, and it's not a one size fits all answer here, right? It's a very holistic approach that requires a very non-linear approach. It's something that is constantly shifting, moving, and it's not an HR initiative. It is not an executive leadership initiative. It's an all people initiative that
Yeah.
involves the entire organization. So if the leader brings up this topic, the first thing that comes to mind is what brought on this question? Two, why does the leader feel like it matters so much? And three, who else are we going to incorporate in this discussion? Because it's not one dimensional. It involves everyone in the organization, and everyone will have a different perspective that adds value to the discussion. So it's not it is a big challenge, right? Because right now we're contending with a lot of forces that companies have to fend off on a daily basis just to remain profitable and innovative. So it's a conversation that requires continuity. It's not an initiative, it's an imperative. and it has to be part of the strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that, Lauren. And I like the idea of those allyships and bringing people on board to move this conversation forward. And by the way, we talked about that in the last two panels about connecting with champions in the organizations who are respected by others and can become those role models of the positive behaviors that we want to see in the organization. For everybody listening, uh, one of the reasons why I didn't want to call this panel, productivity performance and employee experience, is because now and forever, but especially now, we understand that you can't separate the person from the employee, the human from the employee. So if you have a sick family member at home with COVID, or if nobody has COVID, but you are homeschooling, couple of children, and you are a single parent, for example, whatever you are going through, the difficulties of whatever you're going through in life will impact in one way or another the work that you're doing. So when we start peeling this big onion, you have in the center of that onion the sort of the inner layer of workplace experience, meaning what happens in the physical space of work, employee experience, which is what happens to you as an employee of that organization, but more importantly then outside is human experience, all that you live holistically as a human, and of course how that impacts your work. So that's why I wanted to make sure that we connected dots here between productivity, performance, and human experience. I'm going to ask you, all panelists, I want to ask you a question. How do you create the ROI for building great human experience at work? How do you, if you have to create a case, because say you want to do a program that seemingly doesn't have anything to do with the employee, but more with a human, and you got to sell that program or that strategy or that idea to your CFO, to your CEO, you're going to have to show probably some ROI in there. How do you build ROI on human experience stuff? Anybody here who wants to jump in first? Heather, please go ahead.
Sure. So for me, one of the first things that I do is I develop programs that are cost neutral. They don't cost anything, and I show results on that. Been at Shift for 6 months. We've increased our employee net promoter score by 89%.
Wow.
How did we do it? It was a lot more about listening and reacting to things that employees were asking for that didn't cost money. And then showing, okay, now we've done this low-hanging fruit. Here's how we're prioritizing. Here's the investment we would need to be able to further our net promoter score. And you could start to see things like our booking and our conversions were increasing. We could see employees were spending more time servicing the customers. We had quicker response time. Whereas I couldn't take it, this was all HR. It was like, hey, I think this momentum's helping. Shouldn't we be doing more here? And you can, hold me accountable for if we start to see drops in these type of business measures, then maybe I've hit something the wrong way and we need to pivot. And you start to get those little baby steps and buy-in, and all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, let's invest some more here.
Oh, I love that. And actually, Heather, you're reminding me of this. I created this Venn diagram a long time ago for a design thinking workshop. And because people always ask, like, where do we begin? How can we do design thinking for the first time? And the answer applies very much here, which is what you're saying is the intersection of those quick wins, things that are problems in the organization that combine with the quick wins and combine with those that are the least amount of resource, they need the least amount of resources and can engage the most amount of people. That intersection, even if it's small, it's a great place to begin the journey. Were you wanted to add something else?
No, go ahead.
Were you going to add something else? My question was totally grammatically, wrong. Thank you, Heather. Lauren, please go ahead.
Yeah, Heather, you're absolutely correct. You have to start with simple things. Sometimes you start with those low-hanging fruit pieces, right? Net promoter score, employee satisfaction. People don't think about it until you measure. That's what's interesting about it. informal and formal surveys, right? Articulating what you're listening to and then tying it into those metrics and then feeding it back to leadership and feeding it to the employees as well. It's very important to include them in that feedback so that they know not only that their voices are being heard, but that there's action being taken on those voices being heard. And it's incredible what happens once you start publishing those findings, and leaders will often sometimes volunteer how it correlates with the different operational results that they're seeing. Oh, I wonder if this has to do with the increase in customer satisfaction. Maybe we should measure that, and they contribute. They become part of the process in that way.
Fantastic. Bridget, do you want to add anything?
I did. Heather and Lauren has already gave some great examples. I just want to build on some of the things that they said. I approach this two different ways. First, as they mentioned about the employee feedback, but I also like to do human experience employee feedback. So, for example, today I'm having 2 tea with bees where I put on my Southern Belle hat because I'm from Alabama. And I set it up like a high noon tea. We're going to have cucumber sandwiches and scones with mint jelly. And we're going to focus on one topic, and it's by invitation only. So we're going to focus on the topic of employee morale. Where are we now and where do you want it to be? And so the first 2 teas that I'm having it with new leaders so I can find out about what they're perceiving. And then the second T is with senior leaders. So that's going to give me some insight regarding initiatives and things that I want to do moving forward because I'm getting their feedback. The second thing that I like to do is to focus on those important metrics. Yeah. So I can look at what's going on with my employee relations and my turnover and my grievances and see what trends there are and tie back recommendations to that. Because that's the reality. That's objective. And so those are the 2 ways I like to approach that.
No, that is fantastic. And I want to actually piggyback on that, Bridget, to ask another question, which is, how do we make all things human experience that we do at work, how do we make them not only a stick, but the very concept of focusing on human experience, how do we make it sustainable in time and not just the fad of the moment that everybody talks about, and that's why we do it. So any insights on this?
Well, what I have found to be beneficial is one of my colleagues on yesterday said intentional. We're going to do some of that low-hanging fruit, but then we're going to have some intentional, sustainable things that's planned, that's in a schedule, and preferably got a budget tied to it. And we're going to have that employee experience in terms of having employees be part of that planning. Because if they contribute to it, they're going to be those mavens, those influencers. And it's not just a high performance, but those employees that's, you always seem to have them in employee relations issue. You want to get their feedback because sometimes they're going to tell you things that the great performers won't. Yeah. So tying anything that you do back to something that's measurable, that's intentional, and then having that leadership involvement. It's not just they say, go ahead and do it, but what part are you going to help me with?
Yeah,
I need you to be involved in it. I need you to do me some videos. So when I'm having new hire orientation and employee experiences, I'm going to show that video if you can't show up in person. Yeah. And schedule them for events and have them to put part in their calendar. All those intentional things are going to make it happen when you get caught up in the day-to-day business.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And I love the engagement of the leaders. I mean, one of the reasons why there are so many there are so many organizational practices that for laziness of the organization fell in the hands of HR and people ended up hating them. It's just because the leaders didn't engage with them in the first place. They didn't say, like, performance management is one of them. I mean, everybody in most organizations hate performance management because they see it as an HR thing and not as an organizational thing because they were never, like you said, engaged with that. And this is true for everything, and human experience, which is even more sensitive than any other topic. Thank you, Bridget. Heather, Lauren, do you want to add anything to this question? How do we make human experience work, stick, and be real and sustainable?
Yeah, for me, I think what Bridget had mentioned with, it all starts with the leader. So if HR comes over the top, and maybe it is because, it seems easier, I sign it to HR, they'll build a wellness program or a spiff or something, and then they'll be able to deploy it. Really, it's the power of the leader. So anything that we want to have sustainable, every minute that we spend helping a leader understand their
Yeah.
power, how to use it, how to be empathetic, how to also drive accountability in that, all of those micro conversations you're having with leaders as an investment will pay off longer for sustainability than any, cute HR program that I can come and talk about. I'd love to do it, but the hard work is really in those moments and those conversations with leaders on how they're responding and reacting to day-to-day things that are happening to them.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Heather. Lauren, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think it's also a combination, because part of helping them feel part of the process is incorporating not only their feedback, but trends and metrics that apply to each one, right? So what any initiative or any endeavor, because I think this is a series of a cumulative set of endeavors. A, make them part of the strategic agenda. B, make sure that that you as HR are incorporating those different levers that they are moving into your HR agenda, and so it becomes this bi-directional discussion, and it becomes continuous, because as those levers evolve, you have to also adjust your your human experience initiatives. But if you keep that collaborative approach consistently, you're always going to be in the conversation, and they're always going to engage you in the conversation because they
Yeah.
are part of it. I remember that commercial about math tutoring. I don't recall the name of the company now, but the woman says, well, telling it and doing it are two different stories, right? I
Yeah.
think the difference between HR today and HR in the past is that in the past it was too fluffy, it was too superficial, it was oh, this is important, right? I think that HR has evolved or is evolving into more results oriented type practice, where all of the initiatives are being measured. And so that's giving HR more credibility today than it had in the past. And so if you combine all of those pieces, you can ensure that that this is always top of mind, but it does require relentless tenacity and grit on HR's
Yeah.
part to keep it at the top of the agenda. It is exhausting at times, and it is something that is not the only aspect of HR, right? We have a gazillion things we have to focus on, but understanding that we are the drivers of this conversation, we are the ones championing it, we're just engaging with leadership to do so.
I think that is so powerful, and the reality is that there are so many things going on that can derail us from the agenda of human experience at work, and not because the agenda of human experience at work is not important. It's just because sometimes there are emergencies. I mean, imagine the many HR functions before COVID working hard on all diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging things, and literally overnight being told stop all that work because now we gotta see how we're even gonna work, because we don't even know if we can be in the office. So that makes it really hard for anybody to be focused on something long term. But I'm hoping that, like you're saying, Lauren, that we keep this conversation on top of the agenda across the board. I'm going to go back to the sort of to the concept of the panel, and discussing all about productivity, performance, and the connection with human experience at work. When we talk about human experience, when we talk about what we can do in the organizations that we work for to deliver that best human experience for the people who work with us, who work for us, what should we be thinking about? What how do we deliver that greatest human experience for them? What comes to your mind? And I ask you this question because I would love for those who are participating in the conversation here, who are tuning in, to walk away with some tangible sort of actions that they can take to move the conversation from just employee experience to human experience, and to start doing things that they may not be doing today. So how do we deliver and create that great human experience at work? Lauren, we go with you first.
I think, Enrique, as an organization, you have to be clear on your why, right?
Yeah.
You have to be clear on what that mission is for your organization. And then you can articulate what that human experience looks like, right? Because you're talking about the expression of the values of the organization and how those are lived in, day out. And once you have those values clarified, then you go into assessing what your employees say your human experience is, right? Taking that feedback, because at the end of the day, it's a collective.
Yeah.
So that human experience, ultimately, yes, you're going to have some basics that are important to everyone. Everyone wants to feel heard. They want to feel seen. They want to have a positive self-actualizing experience while working, right? Not the other way around. But at the end of the day, they have to feel like they can build on that. Okay, so we've got the basics, but something's missing. And that's something, that it factor, is different company to company. Mm-hmm. So all of those pieces really form that human experience that looks differently according to organization. Once you feel, you meet the basics, then you build on that.
Yeah. And one thing, thank you for that. One thing that also connecting with something that Heather said before, is that a lot of things that are drivers for great human experience at work literally cost $0. It's just so sort of counterintuitive that we're thinking about building the best human experience organization in the world, and most people would say, I mean, that's going to cost a lot of money. But the reality is that listening to people, empathizing with their pains and sufferings, respecting them, treating them with dignity in the workplace, those things cost zero. You just have to have the right culture for those things to happen. And that's when the investment comes, to train your leaders or to hire the right leaders and the right people in the first place. Heather, I think you wanted to add something, and then we'll go with Bridget.
Sure. So one real practical thing that I did at a prior company is, when I'd started there, I'd ask the managers, what's the one HR thing that we are doing today that takes the most amount of time? Mm-hmm. And then what's the thing that takes the most amount of energy? So from your viewpoint, doesn't produce the results you need. And it came down to the performance review. Oh, I spent all this time on performance reviews. Employees hate it. I hate it. Like, we got to just figure out what to do different. And the first year I said, okay, let's just invite people back into a conversation and see where it goes. Because we were mid-year. It's not like we could do something robust. And I didn't want to get to the end of the year and not have meaningful conversations. So we created, it was really 4 questions. And it was for the employee. What were you most proud of that you accomplished this year? And how did it help the company? What did you learn this year as a skill or capability, or how did you grow this year? And how did that help the company? And then, what do you need more help with? And I wish I was smart enough to know what I was doing when I was doing it, but really it changed the conversation from a company first of, here's the goals you have, here's why you got to do it. And then you come to the table and you pitch to me why what you did, was perfect, to an employee first conversation. And you get to the same result, but it's a more pleasant process. So that's something like really tiny, tactical, and produced an engagement that the leaders enjoyed more, the employees enjoyed more, and we actually started to see better results in alignment of what people are doing and what they should be focused on and what they needed help with.
And that in itself is better human experience, because then it's a little bit of the art of prioritizing, right? I mean, putting the resource, at least time wise, that where we have to put it, where we are delivering the best value for the people and the organization. Thank you for that, Heather. Bridget.
Well, when I think about employee experience and transitioning to human experience, I go back to when I used to be a programmer, a software specialist. I began with the end in mind, and I think in layers. So if I was thinking about employee experience versus human experience, I think of it advancing in education. Most people work because they need to earn a living. So that's your high school diploma when you hire me, right? Then once you hire me and you add that next layer of providing me rewards and benefits and employee wellness, that's my bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
Now I want to master it, so I'm going to get a master's, but now you got to talk about human experience. That's when you show me why my work is important to the organization, how my work is tied to the purpose of why this company exists. So if we build on those layers and thinking about it from a progressive standpoint, we're going to go from the basics of providing total rewards and employee wellness to tying it back to why your job exists, what your role is, what's your value. And that's a human experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Let me ask you something from for HR leaders. I mean, many of them are still stuck in, employee engagement stuff, and I'm not saying that that's not important. It's just that it's just a small part of the employee experience in general, and even a smaller part of the human experience in general.
Right.
So for those HR leaders, for those HR practitioners who are beginning to think how to create the right strategies in HR to deliver great human experience, what would you want them to learn? What would you want them to do differently? What capabilities would you want them to embrace in their HR functions to be able to at least start designing and putting the human experience agenda forward?
For me as an HR leader, I think we have to model what we want others to do. So one of the things that I do with my team, I do that same thing that I mentioned. I tie our strategic goals back to what we do and then get granular and say, this is your part by your job existing. This is how that ties into that specific strategic goal. And then adding even more to that, I say you are the business owner, the business leader for the function that you perform. I need you to go back and look at what you do tied to these strategic goals. Tell me what your strategic and operational goals are, what resources you need, and what you need my help with, and go run your business. It takes us re-educating our own people because, as Lauren and Heather has brought out, we've been used to being transactional. We've been the feel good people and when you in trouble people. Yeah. So we got to re-educate ourselves first as HR people, and we're all HR leaders regardless of our title, and then help our leaders and employees know you're all business owners in here. So let's talk about your why and what you can do to create a great experience, not only for customers, but for yourself, because you're really important to what we do.
Yeah, I like that piece of re-educating ourselves, right? And I have the utmost love for HR, and that's why I do what I do with Hacking HR. But I still see that the overwhelming majority of HR functions around the world, particularly in the United States, we are still pretty transactional. There's still somebody asked me this question recently, and the question was, what percentage of HR functions do you think are like, pretty progressive with the agendas that they're putting forward? And I said, I don't think it's more than 15%. And that person said to me, you're being very generous. She didn't think it was more than 5%. We still see a lot of, we still have to do a lot of work, not in delivering something for everybody else, but in changing ourselves in HR before we can even deliver that agenda, that self-education that you're talking about, Bridget. Heather, I think you wanted to add something.
Sure. For me, I think that everybody who goes into HR these days understands that they need to be the voice of the people. And the way to do that is they also have to understand what the jobs are, what that frontline experience is. If they're not spending time actually either doing it or observing those jobs, they're not going to be able to understand, are these realistic workloads? Are these measures the right measures? Are the leaders actually there to enable the performance or not? So great to be voice of the employees, but you can't be the voice of the employees without understanding and being like that undercover HR and spending time when you first start. The first thing that I do is I understand every frontline role. I do phone jockeying with the customer support teams to understand the challenges that the customers are calling in and how the employees spend their day. I understand the frontline from, and we're in the moving industry, and so what the pandemic has done to the different employees and how their days have changed. And so it's only until I understand that I can get back into seat around the table and be able to intelligently talk about the people experience and the business impacts to that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Heather, for sharing that. Lauren, do you want to add anything?
I would say start your days with asking yourself what impact you're looking to have in your role. It's funny that our titles are human resources, right? And yet, it's very easy to fall into inhuman functions and compliance and, all the whiplash we get from all the different, darts we're trying to hide from on a day-to-day basis. But coming back to that why, what is the reason why I started doing this in the first place? And focusing on that impact will help HR leaders, center themselves around the human experience. Are we being human with ourselves? Am I showing up for myself first before I can, create that impact I want to see? That requires a significant amount of courage, bravery, and grace for what we do. And we can't have an impact if we don't start with ourselves first. So that mindset comes with, checking that box with us first and then leading from that perspective.
Yeah, it's one question that I always keep in mind for my own work in hacking HR, but for HR in general, is what is our legacy, right? I mean, what do we want to leave behind? I doubt anybody in the world will remember us because we were running a good performance management annual review, right? I think that's, really, not it's, I don't want to say meaningless, but it kind of is, in the context of legacy and in the context of the bigger things and the impact that we can cause. But rather, if we go with your question, Lauren, of what is that impact, right? And in 5 years from now, we have an employee that may end up leaving the organization and saying, man, in this organization, they treated me with so much love and respect and dignity. Thanks, HR, for creating that kind of culture. That goes with somebody for eternity. And the opposite is true too. When they say they treated me like, like garbage, because I think it's happened to all of us, right? That we go through an experience that we still remember today where we were treated, very disrespectfully. So that is the question of impact and human experience at work. We're getting closer to wrapping up our conversation, and I want to make sure that we walk away with some very tangible sort of homework, if you will. What, for those who are listening and being part of this conversation right now, what would you tell them to start doing right now? Maybe a couple of things that they can start doing right now to, number one, build that great human experience at work. And number two, equally important, to connect that human experience that you're creating with the success and the healthy sort of profitability, sustainability of the organization you're working for. So what would you tell HR to start doing right now? Couple of things, 3 things that may be very tangible.
I'll go ahead. And so for me, one of the current things that I'm hyper focused on is the difference between appreciation and recognition. I really honed in on recognition. Hey, it's outcome based. We need to understand what people have done in order to receive that recognition. I was horrible at making sure that appreciation was happening along the way. And really, it's the appreciation. I believe in you. I know you can do this. I'm here to support you. I see you as a valuable team player and I'm invested in you. They haven't had the outcome yet, but guess what? Without the appreciation and the clarity of their mission, they won't get to the outcome for us to recognize. And then we're sitting there like, well, I'm just waiting to recognize them. So for me, it's like hone in leaders on appreciating your employees, helping them believe in themselves, removing barriers, and they will get to the outcomes for you to recognize.
Oh, that is fantastic. And especially given that today we are experimenting with so many new things, that getting to that end of delivering the outcome, sometimes it's a little farther down the road. It takes more, even failure that may fall through the cracks of the territory of recognition, but don't, we can still appreciate the work that is being done. So thank you so much for sharing that difference between the two. Lauren?
That was brilliant, Heather, because it's so easy to lose sight of the appreciation component, right? We think that recognition is a one size fits all, and it's not. So great tip there, because what I was thinking is the very first thing that you can do, going back to that topic of impact, is look at all of your initiatives, projects, and really go back to that impact. Really think about what impact you are having in the organization and in the human experience through each of those initiatives. If it doesn't have the impact that you are looking to have, revisit and question why you're doing it in the first place. Outside of compliance, we know the impact there is definitely operational, but I would say that's the one thing I would recommend.
Awesome, Lauren. Thank you so much. Last but not least, Bridget.
First, I would say HR, develop your emotional intelligence skills. So we got the operational down, and then help your leaders to do the same, especially now that we have a hybrid workforce. The second thing that I would do is say, remember the first word in HR, human. Just be human. Employees don't expect us to be perfect. When we do, we make a mistake, acknowledge it, learn from it, do better. Just try to do better than what you were the day before. And the final thing is, it's great to utilize the technology that we have on a variety of resources, but we have to balance that technology with our human intelligence and humanity. A great example of that is one of my favorite shows growing up was the $1 Million Man, $6 Million Man, Steve Austin. And when he became injured and they gave him all that great technology, he was able to do some great things, but it didn't change him as a human being. He always focused on doing the right thing, helping others, utilizing that technology to the benefit. So that's what we have to do as HR. That's what we have to do as leaders. That's what we have to do as employees. Just be human, do the best thing we can, do better than you did the day before, and go from there.
Absolutely, Bridget. Thank you so much. Heather, Lauren, Bridget, thank you so much for sharing all of these insights with everybody here. For everybody who's tuning in, thank you so much for being part of these conversations that we've had over the past couple of days around wellness and well-being. Yesterday, we had 4 panels. Today, we had 3. The 7 videos of all this summit will be shared in the Hacking HR Lab by next week. So stay tuned. I'm going to let you know via email that they are ready. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been great. And, I think we have created a lot of awareness here, but we have to now move very urgently into action, because wellness and well-being are not only are critical, they are truly becoming a human and a business imperative, because now we see the impacts of not addressing challenges around mental health, wellness, and well-being in the workplace and in society in general. So thank you so much, Heather, Lauren, Bridget, once again. Thank you for being here, and thank you, everybody, for being part of this conversation. I'll see you soon in some of the other Hacking HR events that we have in the roadmap. Thank you, and stay safe and well, everybody. Thank you.